Somewhere on Earth, a woman was cheated on by her soon-to-be husband while they were still preparing for their wedding. Tragically, she died in an accident, but was reincarnated as a princess determined to become queen. Unfortunately, the king is a sex addict with a large harem, which she wants no part of. She tries to escape and meets a mysterious, attractive, edgy guy. Essentially, it's an erotic fan novel of Cinderella. Anyway, let's see what happens. The story begins with a woman in a wedding dress walking towards a throne. She introduces herself as Princess Guinevere Capet from the Syat Kingdom, but we can just call her Eve for short. Suddenly, the door slams shut, making Princess Guinevere nervous as she holds a fancy box tightly. She's here to become the queen of the Twilight Kingdom. We meet the king, King Arthur Ray Uthis, ruler of the Twilight Kingdom. He laughs at Eve's words and asks one of his women about what she said. One of the king's favorites, Liv, laughs at Eve's claim to be queen. The others join in, gossiping that Eve only wants to be queen. They think her weak voice means she's only good at singing like a nightingale. They say the women in the Twilight Kingdom are skilled at dancing and horse riding. Amid the mockery, a girl suggests Eve is there to die and that they should throw her out in flimsy clothes to freeze. Suddenly, King Arthur moves towards Eve and starts to strangle her, causing the box to fall and reveal a ring. Holding her neck, the king mocks the idea that a small princess from a dying country thinks she can be his queen. He calls her dreams silly and stupid. Eve tells the king they were engaged long ago, but he dismisses this, saying it was just a silly verbal agreement between her and her father. He says he is now the ruler, and Eve can only be his possession, a slave and a new toy. Liv interrupts, showing a chain meant for Eve. Eve is shocked and tearful. Liv says the chain was made for her, and King Arthur and Liv put it around her neck. Eve refuses to accept this and demands the chain be removed, insisting she is there to be crowned queen. She begs for the chain to be taken off, emphasizing her royal purpose. Despite her pleas, the king holds the chain and says she doesn't deserve to be queen. He says her only place is to be the lowest among his women, just a toy for him. King Arthur tells her that she might not know, but before she was a princess, her family was sent to his castle. He notes that the others in her family were smarter and never claimed they were there to be queen, only Eve did. At that moment, she realizes everyone in King Arthur's castle seems crazy, and she understands that King Arthur, the man her father and brother wanted her to marry, is a complete psycho. Her backstory shows she originally came from Earth, with modern items around her. While sitting on her bed, she remembers having a strange and scary dream about a wedding for 2 nights in a row. She didn't know it was a warning from fate until a similar thing happened in real life. She remembers when her father died 2 years ago, she divided the family property in half, keeping one part for herself and giving the other to her stepmother and stepsister. 2 years later, her boyfriend of 5 years decided to marry her. But on the wedding day, she found out a shocking truth. Her boyfriend had been cheating on her with her stepsister. They had been lying to her for 2 years, planning to cause her an accident after the wedding. They wanted to take her share of the property and get the large insurance money from her father. She was too naive to think such a thing could happen. She believed everything was fine with her stepmother and stepsister. Despite the betrayal, she still thinks she was deeply in love with her boyfriend, feeling it was love at first sight when they met. She had dreamed of a happily ever after, but it was all just wishful thinking. Eve couldn't accept dying so miserably, especially on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Her boyfriend and stepsister pushed her off at the chapel, and all 3 of them died from the fall. Suddenly, she woke up coughing and found herself reincarnated as Princess Guinevere, confused about why she came back to life as someone else. That night, Liv visits to check on her. Liv mentions she was prepared to retrieve Eve's lifeless body, but was surprised to see her alive. Eve tells Liv she didn't want to die and that today was her wedding day. The original Eve died, and now she has been reincarnated with an unknown bride from Earth. Realizing she's in a different world, memories from her past overwhelm her, causing a headache. Not knowing Liv's name, Eve asks, and Liv introduces herself. Liv then praises King Arthur as the most honorable man in the Twilight Kingdom and emphasizes her own special position as his favored woman. Still confused, Eve asks who Majesty refers to. Liv explains she means King Arthur. Liv then questions why Eve seems more foolish after coming back to life and wonders why Eve is looking at her with a dreadful expression, asking if she thinks she's ugly. Princess Guinevere expected the woman in front of her to be beautiful, but found her attitude disgusting. While thinking about this, Eve suddenly vomited on Liv, a sign of her reincarnation into Guinevere's body. Liv is disgusted by this and asks if Eve wants to die for her actions. Liv slaps Eve, causing her to fall. Eve's headache worsens, and she realizes she must have stopped breathing for a while. She wonders why there are chains around her neck, feeling like she's in a nightmare. Liv warns Guinevere that her attitude won't work here. Liv pulls her hair, makes her drink something, and mentions the king's plans. Despite this, Liv promises a somewhat pleasant wedding. Eve wonders about the game, wedding, an experience Liv mentioned. Suddenly, the king arrives and calls for Liv. Guinevere starts coughing, likely from what Liv made her drink. The king pulls the chain around Guinevere's neck, and Liv tells him the eager princess wants to spend her wedding with someone. Guinevere can't hold back her frustration and blurts out that he's the worst king ever. The king glares angrily at her. Just then, someone approaches and Liv interrupts, telling the king that Lawrence has news about the ongoing war. Dismissing the messenger, the king focuses on Guinevere's outburst, leaving tension in the room as he considers her words. Once again, the king grabbed the chain around Princess Guinevere's neck, emphasizing her importance due to controlling a significant stretch of coastline on the northern side of the continent. The chain symbolized not just jewelry, but also the power he held over her, connecting their destinies in unseen ways. The king, aware she's an illegitimate daughter from a small farming and trading country, questions her desire to be queen without a legitimate claim to the throne. He degrades her, insisting she should know her place. The king takes her to an orgy party, telling her this is where she belongs. He boasts about his many slaves and beasts, likening Guinevere to them. He pushes her into the crowd, suggesting she should spend her memorable wedding night there. Some slaves try to touch her, and one man with a foot fetish expresses a bizarre desire to lick her feet, which disturbs her greatly. She shouts for them to let her go and runs away. Unable to make sense of her situation, she feels it's all absurd. She wonders why she ended up in such a nightmarish place after dying, feeling like it's from a book she once read. Lost in thought, she trips over a stone and falls. In distress, she sees a masked man in the garden and begs him for help. Meanwhile, in the king's playroom, Liv suggests a game where people guess how many beasts will have the privilege of being with Eve, even offering herself as an option. King Arthur, however, feels regretful. He was considering a marriage alliance with the Syatt family, but Guinevere's frivolous nature makes him rethink. He believes having her as queen would bring shame to his people. Upon Liv's suggestion, the king decided Eve would be executed by dawn. Liv questioned the rush, noting Eve's dowry hadn't arrived yet. She emphasized Eve's beauty and innocence, asking if the king had the heart to let her go. Despite preferring cunning and clingy women like Liv, the king found Eve's attitude repulsive and was sick of her presence. Meanwhile, Eve sought help but found her legs inexplicably weak, unable to stand. Feeling weak and fearing for her life, Eve wondered if Liv's drink caused her condition. Struggling to stay composed, Eve noticed a slave in a demon mask submerged in a fountain. Unlike the others, this one seemed calm, with scars and a faint smell of blood. Suddenly, two slaves searched for Eve, unaware of her presence. They speculated about her whereabouts, noticing the masked man with a weapon in the fountain. They feared he was a noble intruder and rushed off to inform the king. Nervously observing him, Eve noticed the strong smell of blood. Surprisingly calm, he asked if she had been drugged. Eve introduced herself as a princess of the Syatt family, stating he couldn't defile her. Intrigued, the masked man knew King Arthur saw the Syatt family's support as expendable and had no plans to make her queen. He realized using Eve's situation to send her away would ruin her reputation. Eve was captivated by the masked man's handsome appearance and mesmerizing golden eyes. The man gently lifted Eve and gave her a choice. He could arrange for her to go home immediately if she valued her family, or she could stay and face a life of pain and sorrow. He left the decision to her. Overwhelmed, Eve burst into tears and begged the masked man to take her away. Curious, the masked man asked her name, to which she replied, Guinevere. He asked if she had any wishes for the night. Eve expressed her desire to be a queen, not a slave. She declared herself the bride and expressed her dislike for deceit and abandonment. Unaware, Eve felt feverish and dizzy, unable to control her speech. The masked man gently placed Eve down and asked for a moment. He walked to the fountain and took out a dark, intimidating sword. With precision, he used it to break the chain around Eve, setting her free. As he worked, the masked man reassured Princess Guinevere that everything would happen as she wished. After some time, the masked man carried Princess Guinevere to a secluded bed. She felt uncomfortable and thirsty lying there. The masked man, noting her condition, revealed he had also been drugged by Liv. He expressed surprise at Liv's increasingly cunning and malicious actions. Guinevere realized Liv had drugged her with an aphrodisiac, explaining her strange feelings. With a curious look at the masked man's attractive physique, Guinevere gathered courage to ask if she could see beneath his mask. The masked man agreed and revealed his face, revealing his striking handsomeness. Grateful for his kindness and comfort on this difficult wedding day, Guinevere couldn't resist. She kissed him passionately, deepening their connection. Meanwhile, past midnight, a group of men argued outside the castle about returning to their outpost due to surprise attacks by beastmen at their barracks in Wallin. Among them was a young man named Jay, talking with a masked man who was revealed as Lorns, known as the ruthless, dark dragon. Jay updated Lorns on the beastmen attacks and their shortage of supplies. Curious if Lorns had insights from his recent trip to secure funds for the army, Jay learned of Lorn's plan to personally ask King Arthur for the necessary funds, despite a troubling incident the previous night. Jay warned Lorns against asking King Arthur for funds, teasing him for being cautious and stingy. Surprisingly, Lorns revealed he wanted to bring Eve with them. Shocked, Jay asked if Lorns had feelings for Arthur's servant. Dismissing Eve as just a dancer, Jay thought it risky for her to have relations with a noble. Lorns disclosed that Eve's status as a lady was valuable to Arthur. Irritated, Lorns vowed to resolve the matter quickly and return in 3 days. Jay noticed Lorns' unusual focus on Eve, suspecting she must be exceptionally attractive for his typically stoic friend to be infatuated. Lorns blushed, confirming Jay's observation. Later, after Lorns' group left the kingdom, Eve woke up partially undressed. Recalling the intense night, she realized she was now part of a book called Lorns the Great, involving the Twilight Kingdom and Syat, though it was obscure with no online presence. Feeling like the sole reader of this unknown book, Eve realized she had somehow become Guinevere Capet, a princess from Syat in the novel. She connected her current experiences with the book's memories, understanding herself as Guinevere Capet, a minor character with a tragic life in the novel. In the story, Guinevere was born illegitimately, but given the title of princess. Her father and brother arranged her marriage to King Arthur of the powerful Twilight Kingdom. Despite her title, Arthur held disdain for Syat and treated her poorly. Princess Guinevere, neglected by her husband, was falsely portrayed as spoiled and promiscuous in the novel. Months after her marriage, she met a gruesome end through beheading. In her homeland of Syat, her cold-hearted relatives spread rumors tarnishing her reputation, claiming she was promiscuous before marriage. This false narrative haunted her even after death. A year later, the protagonist Lorns rose to power and unified the northern continent. Only then was Princess Guinevere's name cleared in the records of the Twilight Kingdom. Now understanding her story, Guinevere questioned the value of clearing her name after death. Instead, she wed to seek revenge while alive. No longer willing to be controlled by the wicked, she resolved to live a life worthy of herself. Looking in the mirror, Guinevere admired her captivating purple eyes, feeling the excitement of her royal blood, like a fairy tale come true. Suddenly noticing hickeys on her neck, she wondered if they were from the shackles, then realized they were from her encounter with Lorns that night. Remembering being carried away from Arthur's garden, she regretted not learning Lorns' name. Disoriented from drugs, she couldn't recall his appearance but considered him superior to Arthur, noting his rare possession of a sword as a slave. Guinevere wondered if she would meet Lorns again in the future. Meanwhile, Lorns battled fiercely with the beastmen at their outpost, surprised by their numbers. Jay clarified that the issue was not their quantity, but the lack of reinforcements. Jay explained that their supplies had run out, and the nobles' troops had withdrawn, leaving only their own forces in the fight. He suggested retreating to avoid needless sacrifice. Lorne emphasized that their fight wasn't just for Arthur, but for the people of the Twilight Kingdom. Jay understood the importance of holding the defense line to protect the border town from the wild giants, and considered his mother's potential shame if they retreated. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Maids speculated about Eve's escape to Snowmelt Castle. Seeing her current state, they doubted she could have left the palace the previous night. They had searched everywhere except the haunted abandoned castle. Liv looked down on Eve as she was thrown to the ground outside. Liv mocked Eve for appearing ridiculous with her torn clothes and apparent shame. Eve ignored Liv's comments, reflecting on Guinevere's tragic fate in the book. She realized that in that story, Guinevere met a quick demise due to the stigma surrounding her. Remembering Lorne's straightforward warning, he had stated that they would subject her to humiliation to justify sending her home. He also stressed that her family should quickly send someone to retrieve her if they truly cared. Otherwise, she would face a life of suffering. Afterward, they entered the throne room where the king awaited her. The king questioned his companions about who had been with the princess the previous night, and everyone admitted to it. Fueling the rumor, the king smirked and mockingly asked if she had enjoyed herself. Undaunted, she admitted to being with someone but refused to reveal his identity. She boldly stated that none of those present had been her companion, insisting it had been just one man. She recalled being delirious the previous night, unable to remember the man's face, but recognizing distinctive scars on his body that confirmed he wasn't a palace slave. Liv interrupted, accusing her of lying and demanding to know the truth about her companion and the events of the night. Undeterred, Eve confessed as a princess that she had been with someone but insisted it wasn't anyone from the palace. King Arthur pressed for a name. Feeling trapped, Eve decided to fabricate a lie, claiming it was Liv. This revelation surprised Liv. The king found the situation amusing and laughed. Liv, enraged, tried to attack Eve, but the king intervened, stopping her and remarking that he had never encountered someone bold enough to speak such falsehoods in his presence. Eve defiantly insists that she is not speaking nonsense, pointing out that everyone seems to claim to have slept with her. She challenges the king to provide any proof of such claims. To further her deception, she falsely asserts having proof of sleeping with Liv, indicating bite marks as evidence. Liv defends herself to the king, claiming that Eve left the marks when she resisted Liv's commands. Surprisingly, the king agrees with Liv's explanation, rationalizing that women like Liv, who engage in promiscuity within the harem, are forbidden. Liv suggests that Eve write a letter to her home country, apologizing and sending a gift as a gesture of remorse. In the meantime, Eve is to be confined to the water cell until a response is received. Upon hearing the king's decision about the water cell, Eve recalls the grim descriptions from a book where the notorious water cell was depicted as a dark and horrifying place infested with rats and maggots. Few emerged from there unscathed, and the hosts' bodies were described as festering and repugnant at the time of execution. Understanding the severity, she realizes that, had she been the Guinevere from the book, she might have given in. However, she acknowledges that not everyone gets a second chance at life. Determined to survive, Eve refuses to accept such a fate, despite her fury. She prioritizes her survival and, with humility, kneels before the king, pleading for mercy. In a humble tone, she explains that she genuinely believes she hasn't committed any wrongdoing. She adds that Sayat's generosity dowry for her is still en route, emphasizing her commitment to making amends. Anticipating that the escort might reconsider halfway upon learning about her confinement in the water cell, Eve employs acting skills she learned from her stepsister's theatrics. As she plays her part, she comes to a realization that the key to her situation lies in money and securing a degree of freedom to seize any opportunity for escape. Seizing an opportunity, she addresses the king, asserting that Eve would not willingly remain in his harem. She suggests an alternative, asking the king to allow her to atone for her perceived wrongs through hard work. This plea isn't just a plea for mercy, but a strategic move to create a chance for herself to escape her precarious situation. Moved by our girl's apparent remorse, Liv appeals to the king for leniency. Thanks to Liv and Eve's convincing performance, our girl manages to avoid the dreaded water cell. Instead of facing imprisonment or execution, becoming a maidservant seems like a better outcome compared to her previous life. However, what appears to be mercy takes an unexpected turn when one of the maids, showing disdain, splashes water on Eve. She informs Eve that she has now been demoted to the lowest rank among the maids. Warning Eve against calling out Liv's name, she emphasizes that a princess from a small country like Syat can only serve as a maid here. The maids leave, laughing, while Eve harbors a desire for revenge. However, she acknowledges her current inability to retaliate and resigns herself to waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, one of the maids slips on the wet and soapy floor. They question our girl about why she used so much soap, but she feigns ignorance, claiming that using soapy water makes things cleaner. The maids wonder aloud if anyone in their right mind would use so much soap, but our girl insists she's never done household chores as a princess and is only an amateur. Unapologetic, she holds resentment towards everyone in the palace, convinced that they deserve the inconvenience she caused. Recalling the time she was intimate with Lorns, our girl remembers his kindness but remains unsure about his identity, whereabouts, or whether he will prove to be a friend or foe. We conclude the story for the first part of this series. Now, what will happen next? Will Eve escape the water cell and navigate Arthur's court? How will Lorne's mission for outpost funds unfold amidst tensions with the Beastmen? Lastly, what alliances will Eve forge, and what secrets of the Twilight Kingdom will she uncover in her quest for justice? Tune in next time for the part of this series. Thank you for watching.